January 6th, 2003, Everbrook Pass, Colorado. A quiet mountain town blanketed in snow, where the air feels still enough to hold a secret. That night, Harper Lynne Caldwell finished her shift at the Copper Lantern Bar, laughing with coworkers as the wind began to rise outside. She slipped on her navy coat, waved to the bartender, and stepped out into the storm. It was supposed to be a 10-minute drive home, but by morning, her car was still there, windows iced over, engine cold, her purse and cracked phone sitting untouched on the passenger seat. And just a few miles up the mountain pass, searchers would find a blood-stained glove and a single orange sock that didn't belong to her. Harper was gone. In a place where people still left their doors unlocked, fear spread like wildfire through the snow. Neighbors lit candles in their windows. Search teams combed the woods. Her husband called her name into the white silence until his voice gave out. Days turned into weeks, then years. Her case froze with the winter and stayed that way for 16 long seasons, until a forgotten DNA sample, sealed away in an old evidence bag, finally melted the silence. Tonight, we return to Everbrook Pass, to a town buried by time, a mystery written in snow, and a single clue that refused to fade. An orange sock. What really happened to Harper Caldwell that freezing night in 2003? And how did one small fragment of fabric hold the secret for nearly 2 decades? Before we begin, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city and state in the comments. Tell us if stories like this one ever touched your town. Then subscribe, tap the bell icon, and stay with us, because some stories never fade, until the truth finally comes home. January 2003. Everbrook Pass, Colorado. Nestled beneath the sprawling, snow-draped peaks of the San Isabel Range, the small town of Everbrook Pass existed in a world all its own. It was the kind of place where each breath felt like it came with a promise. Life here would always be gentle, always predictable, as soft as the powdery snow blanketing the streets and rooftops every winter. But even the calmest places have secrets buried just beneath the surface, waiting for the right storm to uncover them. That night, the town seemed to glow with its usual warmth. Lights sparkled in the windows of tidy homes. The Copper Lantern Bar, a local fixture with its worn wooden sign and strings of holiday lights, buzzed with easy laughter and clinking glasses. Inside, Harper Lynne Caldwell, known by everyone as simply Harper, stood among her co-workers, her honey blonde hair glinting in the golden light, her clear gray eyes shining with the kind of joy that drew people in. Harper wasn't the type to dominate a room, but her presence always made it brighter. Her friends teased her gently, nudging her to have one more drink, to stay a little longer, but she just laughed, patting Sienna the bartender on the hand as she gathered her things. Harper was the kind of person who made friends everywhere she went. In her job as a travel consultant, she'd brought a little piece of the world into Everbrook Pass, arranging honeymoons to Maui, family ski trips to Vermont, weekends away in California. She'd even planned her own wedding 2 years earlier, when she and Derek Caldwell had promised each other forever in a cedar cabin just beyond the edge of town. Now, Harper and Derek were hoping for a child, dreaming about the life that could unfold here among the pines and the swirling winter winds. But that evening, something in the air felt different. Maybe it was the way the wind howled as it swept through the pass, rattling the bar's windows. Maybe it was the blizzard warnings scrolling across the little television above the shelves of whiskey. Harper lingered at the threshold, pulling her navy coat tight, looping her wool scarf around her neck, slipping her gloved hands into her pockets as she braced herself for the cold. She glanced back inside, catching Sienna's eye. "Text me when you get home," Sienna called, her voice barely audible over the gust that whipped through the door as Harper stepped out. The snow was coming down harder now, swirling in thick curtains that erased the world beyond the parking lot. Harper's boots crunched through the white drifts as she headed for her car, its windows glazed over with frost. She paused, fumbling for her keys, but someone, caught her attention. A truck idled a few spaces over, its headlights casting golden beams through the snow. The silver Ford F-150 was unfamiliar, and inside, a man sat with the engine running, a beanie pulled low over his brow, his thick beard dusted with ice. He rolled down the window, just a crack. His voice was muffled but friendly. "Rough night to be out alone. Need a lift?" For a moment, Harper hesitated. She'd grown up in places where you didn't take rides from strangers, but Everbrook Pass wasn't the kind of town where you expected trouble. Everyone here still left their doors unlocked, still trusted that kindness was the rule and not the exception. She smiled, more out of politeness than agreement, and waved him off. "I'm all right, thanks. My car just needs a minute to warm up." The man nodded, offering a half smile before pulling his truck a little closer. Perhaps to be neighborly. Perhaps just to wait out the storm. Harper slid into her car and dialed Derek. "Hey, babe. Just leaving now. It's wild out here. Looks like we'll be snowed in for a week at this rate," she joked, her breath fogging the cold air. In the background, Derek's voice was muffled by static, but she could hear the faint sound of their dog barking and the creak of their old wood stove. "You want me to come get you?" he asked, worry threading through his tone. Harper laughed, brushing snowflakes from her eyelashes. "I'll be fine. Somebody just offered me a ride." She never finished the sentence. The line crackled, then went silent. Derek tried calling back, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Maybe the storm had knocked out the towers, he thought. Maybe Harper was just driving and would be home soon, safe and sound, like always. But outside, the snow thickened, blurring the world into 1,000 shades of white and gray. In the darkness, the wind howled louder, carrying with it a sense of something unspoken. A presence, watching, waiting. Harper's car remained in the lot, windows slowly icing over. Each minute, a small eternity. The silver truck was gone. 15 minutes. That was all it took for an ordinary evening to become a before and after in Everbrook Pass. 15 minutes for a cheerful travel consultant with dreams of motherhood to disappear into a blizzard, leaving behind a town that still believed nothing bad could ever happen here. The first plow trucks wouldn't pass the copper lantern until nearly midnight, their headlights sweeping over empty cars and undisturbed snow. Harper's car sat alone, looking for all the world like it belonged there, like its owner would return at any moment. But inside, her purse still lay on the passenger seat, her phone's screen cracked and dark. And so the night stretched on, cold and unfeeling. In living rooms across Everbrook Pass, families settled into their routines, never suspecting that beneath the peace of falling snow, something had been stolen from them all, a sense of safety, a belief in the gentle order of the world. By morning, that illusion would be shattered, and nothing in Everbrook Pass would ever be the same. Before tragedy swept through Everbrook Pass like a winter storm, Harper Caldwell was the heartbeat of a life both ordinary and extraordinary in its own quiet way. Born and raised in Oklahoma, Harper had grown up on country roads and fairground laughter, but after college, she'd chosen the mountains. Maybe it was the call of adventure, or maybe she was just chasing the dream of crisp air and endless pine forests. Whatever drew her to Colorado, it was here, beneath the endless sweep of snowy ridges, that she had built her new life. Her days began early, often before the sun. In a cedar cabin tucked among the pines a few miles outside town. The little house was nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a wood-burning stove that rattled in the wind, a porch strung with white fairy lights Harper kept up year-round. Inside there were books stacked on every surface, half-finished travel brochures, mugs of coffee cooling beside her laptop, boots abandoned by the door after long walks with their dog, Wren. Derek would tease her about the constant clutter, but it was Harper's chaos, and it felt like home. Neighbors in Everbrook Pass remembered her as the kind of woman who radiated warmth. She had a smile that could coax even the surliest postman to linger on the steps, and she had a way of making everyone feel seen, from the checkout clerks at the grocery to the elderly couple who lived next door. She was generous with her time, babysitting for friends, volunteering at the library's annual winter book sale, baking pies for the holiday raffle at the firehouse. Harper never seemed to be in a rush, yet she was always in the right place at the right moment, as if she carried a little bit of the town's heartbeat within her. With Derek, her love was gentle and steady. They'd met through mutual friends at a summer concert in Boulder, drawn together by the ease of shared jokes and a mutual craving for the simple joys of life. When they moved into their cabin, it was with a sense of adventure, a shared vision of starting a family where wildflowers grew at the edge of the forest and the stars shone brighter than anywhere either of them had ever lived. The couple had a way of making plans in hushed voices, how they'd turn the second bedroom into a nursery, what kind of tree they'd plant in the spring, how their child would grow up knowing every winding path through the woods. Yet beneath the layers of comfort and routine, something restless lived in Harper's spirit. She collected stories from her clients, the honeymooners, the newly retired, the families chasing one last adventure before the kids grew up. Each tale fueled her own longing to explore, but she always circled back to Everbrook Pass. She once wrote in her journal that this town felt like the end of the world and the center of the universe all at once. It was a sentiment that captured both her contentment and her yearning for more. Everbrook Pass itself was almost frozen in time. It was the sort of mountain town where trust ran as deep as the snowdrifts. People left their keys in the ignition at the gas station, and it wasn't uncommon to find loaves of banana bread waiting on your doorstep. No note, just the quiet assurance that someone cared. There hadn't been a violent crime in decades. Children sledded down Main Street, couples ice skated on the pond near the high school, and the old-timers swapped stories about storms worse than this one and winters colder than anyone could remember. Harper fit into this world like sunlight in a frosted window. Yet she carried her share of burdens, fears whispered in the dark, worries that slipped between the cracks of daily life. The last few months had been hard. Each negative pregnancy test was another silent heartbreak, a secret she shared with Derek alone. Still, she pressed forward with her usual hope, planning vacations for strangers, finding new recipes to try, and filling their home with music and laughter. Her friends knew her as resilient, a woman who greeted setbacks with a quiet resolve and an open heart. But in the final weeks before her disappearance, there had been moments, small, easy to miss, when Harper seemed distracted. She lingered in the grocery aisles, lost in thought. She spent longer than usual staring out the window, watching the snow fall, her expression unreadable. Derek worried but chalked it up to stress or the endless gray of Colorado's winters. Their conversations sometimes drifted toward the future, toward the what-ifs that hung in the air, but always they circled back to hope. In a place where the greatest threat seemed to be a stalled engine or a bear rummaging through trash cans, the idea that darkness could be lurking was unthinkable. Harper herself once laughed at Derek for double-checking the locks. "It's Everbrook Pass," she'd teased. "The only thing out there is snow and deer." But on that fateful night, as she disappeared into the white oblivion, it became clear how thin the line was between safety and danger, between routine and the unthinkable. Beneath the quiet beauty of falling snow, a predator watched from the dark. He studied the patterns of the town, learned who would be alone, which paths were unlit, and how quickly the snow would erase any trace of his presence. While neighbors trusted in the innocence of their home, he waited, patient and unseen. And so, as Harper vanished into the storm, the soul of Everbrook Pass was forever altered, not just by loss, but by the chilling realization that even the safest places can harbor secrets. What no one knew, as the snow settled quietly over their little town, was that the darkness had always been there, waiting for its moment to break the peace. The storm outside the Copper Lantern Bar intensified as the clock neared 9 p.m., blanketing the parking lot with a sheet of swirling white. Most patrons, aware of the mountain's fickle weather, had already left, eager to reach home before the roads became impassable. Only a handful remained, gathering scarves and gloves, pulling hoods over heads as the wind howled down from the ridges above Everbrook Pass. Harper Caldwell was among the last to step outside. The golden light of the bar's windows cast a faint halo behind her as she braced herself against the freezing air. The navy blue of her coat seemed even darker beneath the glow, the wool scarf wrapped tight around her neck a splash of color against the monochrome night. She adjusted the black gloves on her hands, exhaled a puff of breath that quickly disappeared, and hesitated, just for a moment, at the edge of the lot. It was here, in the harsh light of a single flickering street lamp, that Harper was seen for the final time. Sienna Marshall, the bartender, watched through fogged glass as Harper made her way across the drifted snow. Sienna, tidying up behind the counter, saw the flash of a navy sleeve and recognized the distinctive walk. She always noticed details. Maybe that's why her memory of that night would stay with her forever. At the far end of the lot, a silver Ford F-150 pickup was idling, engine rumbling low in the cold. Its windows were frosted, but the faint outline of a man could be seen inside, broad-shouldered, motionless. As Harper neared her car, the pickup's headlights flicked on, bathing the lot in pale gold. She glanced toward the truck, then back at her own car, as if weighing some private decision. Sienna remembered the next part in fragments, bits of movement glimpsed between snowflakes and glass. Harper seemed to exchange a few words with the man, who stepped out into the storm. He wore a beanie pulled low over his ears and a heavy work jacket, his beard thick and wild, but his posture relaxed, unthreatening. He spoke softly. Sienna couldn't hear a word, but the body language was familiar, like neighbors chatting about the weather. Harper's guard appeared down, her stance open and unafraid. She even smiled, one hand holding her phone, the other gesturing toward the storm. A minute later, the man returned to his truck, but didn't leave. Harper stood by her car, fumbling with her keys, rubbing condensation from her windshield with the back of her glove. The snow continued to fall, swirling around her in ghostly eddies. For a few seconds, she was caught between worlds, the safety of the bar's warm lights and the deep, unknown darkness of the mountain pass. The moment lingered, then faded. Sienna turned away, distracted by the crash of a glass in the sink. When she looked back, Harper's car was still there, but the silver pickup was gone. She assumed Harper was waiting for her windshield to clear, unaware that in those lost moments, a stranger's plans had already set fate into motion. Outside, the snow kept falling, thick and unyielding. By midnight, it had swallowed the entire parking lot. When the bar finally closed, Sienna walked out to her own car and paused beside Harper's. She noticed the driver's seat empty, frost etching the glass, no footprints leading away, only a clean, untouched blanket of white. The night was silent except for the whine of the wind and the distant echo of plow trucks grinding up the main road. As dawn approached, the streets of Everbrook Pass lay silent under a heavy quilt of snow. Few people ventured out so early, but those who did noticed Harper's car still parked alone near the Copper Lantern. The tires were half buried in slush, and the windshield was now a sheet of ice. In a town where people usually recognized every vehicle and every face, That car's quiet presence seemed more out of place with each passing hour. Word began to spread, slowly at first, through text messages and phone calls. Had anyone seen Harper Caldwell after the staff party? Derek's concern grew as her calls went unanswered, worry settling deep in his chest. He called friends, checked with neighbors, then drove the looping road through town twice, headlights carving uncertain paths through the snow. No sign of her anywhere. Only her car, a silent sentinel in the growing cold. Sienna, too, replayed the night in her mind, sifting through every detail. The way Harper had smiled, the gentleness of the man in the pickup, the harmlessness she'd felt watching them talk. She questioned herself, doubted her own instincts. In Everbrook Pass, you didn't expect evil to wear the face of a neighbor or arrive in a familiar truck. The image of Harper, bundled in blue, lingering in the night's last pocket of light, would haunt her long after the storm passed. By sunrise, the story of Harper's disappearance began to ripple outward. Her car, still untouched, seemed frozen in time, a stark reminder that in a town where nothing ever happened, something unthinkable finally had. There were no tracks in the snow, no witnesses who saw her walk away, no sign of struggle. Just the memory of a brief conversation, a man who seemed harmless, and a blizzard erasing every trace. Within a few hours, the whole town would be out searching. But for now, all Everbrook Pass had were questions and a lingering sense of dread, one that grew deeper with every minute Harper remained missing beneath the cold and silent snow. Morning broke with a pale, uncertain light, the kind that barely touched the edges of the frozen world outside. Derek Caldwell woke with a start, the emptiness on Harper's side of the bed more chilling than the air. He moved through the motions of a man unwilling to admit his fears, checking his phone, dialing her number again, staring at the screen for any sign of life. By 7 o'clock, with dread clawing at his chest, he called the police. News of Harper's disappearance spread across Everbrook Pass in the time it took the sun to rise above the peaks. At first, most people told themselves she must have gotten stuck, maybe walked to a friend's house. Maybe her phone had died. But in a town as close-knit as this, nothing stayed secret for long. Soon, neighbors were peering out frosted windows, and the sheriff's cruiser idled outside the Caldwell cabin, blue and red lights cutting through the white glare of morning. Within hours, a search team was formed. Officers, volunteers, neighbors with snowshoes and dogs, teenagers eager to help but frightened by the seriousness in their parents' voices. Derek moved with desperate energy, retracing the route from the bar to their cabin, calling Harper's name into the woods until his throat burned. Each time he passed her car, still abandoned outside the copper lantern, a new wave of panic washed over him. The engine was cold, the seats empty, her purse and gloves gone. Sheriff Tomlinson, a grizzled man who'd never dealt with anything like this, coordinated the search. They split into teams, fanning out along the roads and trails that twisted through Everbrook Ridge and the surrounding forest. The sky, a relentless gray, pressed down on them, and the storm's aftermath left the landscape eerily silent, except for the crunch of boots in snow. It didn't take long before they found something, a flash of color in the drifts along the ridge, just a few miles from town. One of the searchers, a young woman named Grace, spotted it first. A leather purse half buried, its strap tangled in a bare branch. Inside were Harper's ID card, some loose change, and a pack of gum. Not far from the purse, pressed into the snow, lay a single glove. Black wool, its palm stained dark red. The sight of blood stunned the search party. For a moment, everything stopped. Grace's breath came out in short clouds. Sheriff Tomlinson stepped forward, radioing the find back to base, his voice flat with shock. While they waited for forensics, the group fanned out, searching for more clues. Just a few feet away, half hidden beneath the crusted snow, they found something even stranger. A single orange sock, garish and bright against the white landscape. It was small, the kind of sock a woman might wear under boots, but no one recognized it as Harper's. By the time news of the discovery made its way back to town, fear had set in. Everbrook Pass had never experienced this kind of loss, never felt the icy grip of danger so close to home. People began to lock their doors for the first time in years. Children were kept inside, and parents spoke in hushed tones, watching the news for updates, praying for a miracle that felt less likely with every passing hour. That evening, candles began to appear in windows up and down Main Street. It started with Harper's closest friends, who lined their sills with tea lights as a silent vigil, but soon the whole town followed suit. Warm, golden flickers burned against the glass, fragile points of hope in the encroaching dark. Some residents gathered at the church, bowing their heads, clutching hands, while others wandered the snowy roads, eyes searching for any sign of their missing neighbor. Derek, hollow-eyed and exhausted, refused to go home. He joined every search, trudged through the woods with the others until his legs threatened to give out. He replayed every detail in his mind, searching for some missed clue, some way to turn back the clock. The police asked him the same questions again and again. Had Harper seemed anxious? Did she mention meeting anyone new? Did she have enemies? Each time Derek shook his head, his voice cracking with the strain. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office worked around the clock, piecing together the events of the night. Sienna, the bartender, was questioned again. She described the man in the beanie, the silver truck, the gentle voice that seemed so harmless. A composite sketch was made, but the storm had erased almost everything. The snow swallowing tracks, the darkness hiding every movement. As the hours stretched into another sleepless night, the sense of safety in Everbrook Pass unraveled. The mountain town, once open and trusting, suddenly felt surrounded by invisible dangers. It was as if the blizzard had buried something more than just the roads. It had covered up the past, and with it, the certainty that this place was protected from the violence of the outside world. In living rooms across town, parents hugged their children a little tighter. Couples double-checked the locks on their doors. For the first time in memory, Everbrook Pass was afraid. And out there, somewhere beyond the reach of the searchlights and the prayers, the mystery of Harper Caldwell's disappearance remained, as silent and cold as the snow that continued to fall, whispering secrets only the mountain could hear. The following afternoon, the search expanded north along the winding back roads and snow-packed trails that traced the mountainside. The wind had shifted, the temperature dropping further, and every volunteer felt it, a heaviness in the air, a sense that hope itself was growing colder. At 2 o'clock, a call came in from Deputy Raines. His voice clipped and tense over the radio. He'd found something near the frozen slopes off the old logging road, 6 miles from the Copper Lantern. Sheriff Tomlinson arrived first, the crunch of his boots breaking the brittle silence as he followed Raines' outstretched hand to a shallow hollow beneath the trees. The world seemed to hold its breath as the group gathered around. There, half covered by drifted snow and wind-blown pine needles, lay Harper's body. The shock was almost physical, a jolt that passed from one searcher to the next, stealing words from their mouths and color from their cheeks. The scene was quickly cordoned off. Forensics teams began their work, cameras clicking in the frigid light, gloved hands sifting carefully through snow and debris. The details emerged in chilling fragments. Harper's coat and scarf askew. Her wrists marked with raw abrasions, 2 small holes in her chest where the bullets had entered. There was no evidence of sexual assault, but the violence was unmistakable, deliberate, abrupt, without mercy. Forensics estimated she'd died within half an hour of leaving the bar. As word of the discovery reached town, the last traces of hope crumbled. The candles in windows became silent memorials. Harper Caldwell, who had brought so much light to her friends and neighbors, had been taken in the cruelest way possible. Derek, already running on fumes, broke when he heard the news. Friends led him away from the crowd, their arms wrapped around him as he wept beneath the endless white sky. Before the shock could settle, another wave of fear surged. Late that same afternoon, a call came in from Timber Lodge, a small motel at the edge of town. A maid named Alina Drew, just 22, had not shown up for her evening shift and was not answering her phone. Her supervisor, a cautious older woman named Mrs. Willoughby, tried to reassure herself that Alina was merely late. But deep down, she felt the familiar chill of dread. The police searched Alina's small room, finding her uniform folded on the bed, her phone left charging on the nightstand. Her car was still parked out front, dusted with fresh snow, keys dangling in the ignition. She had vanished sometime during the storm, on the very same night as Harper. Two women, gone within hours of each other, both last seen within a short distance of Everbrook Pass. The realization spread like wildfire, igniting speculation and terror in equal measure. Was it a coincidence, or the work of a predator hiding among them? The orange sock found near Harper's glove became the center of the investigation. Alina's friends insisted she always wore bright, mismatched socks, a quirky signature of her cheerful personality. The orange sock, they believed, could have belonged to her. The investigation intensified. Deputies canvassed the area, retracing every step, interviewing everyone who had been at the Copper Lantern or Timber Lodge. Fear and suspicion seeped into every corner of town. For the first time, neighbors eyed each other with uncertainty, wondering what secrets might be lurking behind closed doors. Derek Caldwell, Harper's devastated husband, became an immediate focus. The police brought him in for questioning, running him through the standard battery of inquiries: where he was, who he spoke with, how he and Harper had been getting along. Derek answered with a hollow, desperate honesty. He was given a polygraph test, which he passed without hesitation. DNA swabs confirmed he had no connection to evidence at the scene. After 8 grueling hours, Derek was released, broken but cleared of suspicion. Attention shifted quickly to Elliot Crane, a local mechanic with a troubled history. Crane had been arrested years earlier for an assault during a drunken argument, but had since kept a low profile. He was known to drive the mountain roads at night, often working late in his shop or drinking alone at the bar. Police searched his property, combed his garage for any sign of Harper or Alina. They found nothing. No evidence, no trace. Nothing to connect him to either woman or the mysterious orange sock. The investigation hit a wall. The only tangible link between the victims was that single, vivid clue: a small orange sock, half buried in snow, out of place and unclaimed. It seemed to taunt the detectives, a fragment of someone's life that refused to tell its story. As night fell over Everbrook Pass, the sense of unease grew heavier. News vans arrived, their cameras sweeping over shuttered houses and empty streets. The world beyond the mountains was suddenly watching, but answers remained just out of reach. In the weeks that followed, the community would struggle to move forward, haunted by grief and suspicion. Some blamed the storm, others blamed fate, but most whispered about the possibility of a monster in their midst. For Derek, and for Alina's family, closure seemed impossible, especially with that small, garish sock, the one clue tying 2 tragedies together. Sitting sealed in an evidence bag, its secrets frozen along with the winter ground. Winter passed, then another, and another. The snow melted and returned, seasons grinding forward as life in Everbrook Pass slowly settled into a new, haunted normal. The initial storm of headlines and police activity gave way to silence. The investigation stalled, tips dwindled, and the evidence grew cold. Harper Caldwell and Alina Drew became names spoken in whispers, their faces fading from flyers taped to the grocery store window. The mountain air itself seemed to carry their absence, a silent warning that something precious had been stolen and might never be restored. After the funerals, Derek packed up the cedar cabin. Alone with his grief, he lingered over the small, familiar things: Harper's favorite mug, the scarf she'd left on the coat rack, the faint scent of her perfume clinging to their pillow. Neighbors offered help, casseroles, words that meant well, but rang hollow. He tried to stay, but the memories grew too heavy, pressing down with the weight of everything unsaid and unfinished. By spring, Derek was gone, the cabin left empty except for the ghosts that now belonged to it. Harper's parents aged almost overnight. Each winter, they returned to Everbrook Pass to leave flowers along the stretch of road where Harper had vanished. It became a ritual, a gesture of love and loss, sometimes a simple bouquet, sometimes a single orange bloom, stark and bright against the white snow, echoing the mystery of that lonely sock. Year after year, they waited for news, for some scrap of closure, but the case remained unsolved, filed away in a box marked "Homicide Unsolved" deep in the county's evidence vault. For a while, the town tried to move on. People stopped speaking openly of the murders, but the changes lingered. Main Street grew quieter. Strangers were watched with suspicion. Even the landscape seemed changed, every snowdrift and shadow taking on the potential shape of threat. For the Caldwell and Drew families, time moved differently, stretched by grief, frozen by questions. The only comfort came in small, stubborn acts of remembrance: a candle in the window, a flower at the pass, a silent prayer uttered into the cold night. As the years drifted by, Everbrook Pass weathered other storms: lost businesses, a wildfire in the next county, a mining accident that briefly made the news. But the story of Harper and Alina became legend, woven into the fabric of local fear. Young people heard the warnings: don't walk alone at night, lock your doors, trust your instincts. The story was retold each winter, sometimes with fresh details invented to fill the gaps, but always returning to the same unresolved ache: a case with no answers, a wound that refused to close. In the distant city of Denver, the evidence sat forgotten on a metal shelf. The glove, the orange sock, blood samples, photos yellowed with time, all sealed away as if waiting for history to catch up. Detectives came and went. Files changed hands, gathering the dust of bureaucracy and indifference. For a while, the orange sock became a kind of talisman among local officers, a joke for some, a symbol of frustration for others. New leads appeared, only to evaporate in the harsh light of scrutiny. Suspects moved away, or died, or proved their innocence. Technology shifted, but for years it seemed to bring nothing new. 16 winters after Harper's murder, the story nearly faded into silence for good. But fate, or perhaps stubborn hope, had other plans. In 2019, Isabel Caro, a junior forensic analyst barely 3 years into her career, was assigned to audit the Denver evidence vault as part of a routine quality check. She worked alone, ticking off case numbers and checking seals, mostly bored as she moved through boxes of forgotten tragedies. When she came to the Caldwell file, she almost missed the thin envelope wedged between larger bags. Inside, carefully labeled, was a preserved tissue sample taken from the blood-stained glove and the orange sock. Most analysts would have set it aside, assuming it had already been processed, but Isabel was meticulous. She double-checked the records, discovering the sample had never been tested using the latest advances in DNA analysis. Funding had run out, the file had been shuffled to the bottom of a long list, and no one had thought to revisit it. But Isabel, driven by a sense of purpose and the memory of her own cousin lost to an unsolved case, decided to submit the sample for genetic testing. Days turned into weeks as she waited for results, her curiosity turning to obsession. She read the case file from cover to cover. Notes from the original detectives, grainy crime scene photos, sketches of the man in the beanie, theories scribbled in the margins about the meaning of the orange sock. She could almost see Harper and Alina in her mind, their lives and families frozen in grief. Finally, the email came. The sample had produced a viable DNA profile, something the original investigators could never have imagined. With a new sense of urgency, Isabel uploaded the profile to the National DNA Database. Technology had changed everything. Now, it was possible to connect tiny fragments of evidence to millions of profiles across the country, to reach into the past and pull the truth into the light. Back in Everbrook Pass, another winter was setting in. The mountains, indifferent and ancient, stood silent beneath the snow. But inside the Denver lab, something had shifted. A spark reignited after years of darkness. For the first time in 16 years, there was hope that the story of Harper Caldwell and Alina Drew might finally find its ending. Change, when it finally came, was almost invisible. A ripple beneath the surface. The kind that most of Everbrook Pass would not feel until much later. But in a sterile Denver lab, Isabel Caro sat before her glowing computer screen, heart thudding as she watched the DNA results appear, piece by piece, on the monitor. It was a process Harper Caldwell's parents and Alina Drew's family had stopped believing possible, a thread of truth that could outlast 16 years of winter silence. The genetic profile from the old, sealed sample was complete. Modern science had pulled an answer out of the fragments left behind in snow: skin cells, a few dried drops of blood, a strand of hair no one had noticed. Isabel watched as the DNA was uploaded to the national database, a labyrinth of millions of profiles woven together by hope, justice, and countless unresolved griefs. There was nothing for her to do now but wait. Days spent half believing the system would spit out nothing at all, just another dead end. But the match came back. Strange, unexpected. The surname wasn't local, not a Caldwell or a Drew, nor anyone who'd lived in Everbrook Pass at the time. Lathrop. Rare. In Colorado, only a handful of families carried it, and only one within driving distance of the San Isabel Range. The name sent a pulse of energy through the cold case task force. Investigators scoured old records, hunting for Lathrops within 200 miles. In the yellowed snowstorm logs from January 2003, they found a surprising entry. Gordon Lathrop, then 70 years old, was rescued on the very night Harper disappeared. His Ford pickup had skidded off the icy switchback near the ridge, barely a mile from where Harper's body was discovered. At the time, his rescue had seemed unremarkable. A man caught in a blizzard, headlights glimpsed through the white, brought to safety by a snowplow crew who knew him as a retired snow rescue driver, the kind of man who could handle anything. Isabel's team dug deeper. Lathrop had lived alone on the outskirts of a nearby town, his property filled with rusted machinery and stacks of firewood. He'd been widowed for years, his children scattered across the country, and after his accident in 2003, he'd quietly faded into the background. He had never been considered a suspect. He'd seemed, by all outward signs, to be simply a victim of the storm. Now, with a DNA match as sharp as a blade, the case cracked open. Undercover officers watched Lathrop's house for days, observing his routines, the way he carried groceries, took out trash, fed a stray cat that wandered his porch. The detectives waited until trash pickup day, retrieving a discarded coffee cup Lathrop had tossed with the rest of his refuse. In the lab, Isabel's hands shook as she prepared the sample, knowing the lives waiting behind every decision she made. The results returned. A perfect match to the DNA from the crime scene, and to the tiny sample found in the orange sock, the oddest relic of the unsolved double abduction. The evidence was absolute. There could be no mistake. Armed with a warrant, detectives arrived at Lathrop's property, the mountains looming in the distance, the wind sharp with the scent of pine and old snow. The search was methodical, quiet, almost reverent. In a shed stacked with forgotten tools and old winter coats, they found a box marked with faded masking tape, Mies. Winter. Inside, among scarves and hats from decades ago, lay an orange sock. Its color dulled but unmistakable, its brand and fiber a perfect match to the one sealed for years in the Denver evidence vault. The moment felt surreal to everyone present. Here was the missing piece, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to find it. When Lathrop was brought in for questioning, his face was impassive, blue eyes steady beneath thick gray brows. He sat in silence for hours, refusing to meet anyone's gaze, fingers drumming faintly on the metal table. At last he whispered a single line that would echo in investigators' minds for weeks. "I just wanted to help her." She screamed. I panicked. But the truth ran deeper than one moment's panic. The evidence, amassed and patient, had been waiting all this time for justice to catch up. In the weeks that followed, every detail was re-examined, maps redrawn, timelines reconstructed, witness statements replayed in the harsh light of new understanding. Neighbors, long since convinced that the killer had come and gone with the storm, realized the truth had always been closer than anyone dared to imagine. News broke first in Denver, then rippled outward. In Everbrook Pass, phones buzzed, and the hush that fell over the town was profound. The Caldwell and Drew families, who had learned to live with the ache of uncertainty, were summoned back into the light of public attention. Reporters on their lawns, strangers offering sympathy, the old wounds opened and exposed. Yet now, for the first time, there was a sense of something shifting, a chance to close the circle, to let memory and mourning begin to change shape. For Isabel Caro, who had followed the threads others had missed, the feeling was part triumph, part sorrow. She understood more than anyone that the story was never just about science or procedure. It was about lives upended and stolen, about grief that outlasted snow and time, and about the hope that sometimes, even after years of darkness, justice could find its way home. The arrest sent shockwaves through Everbrook Pass and the wider mountain region. People struggled to reconcile the kindly image of Gordon Lathrop, a retired snow rescue driver known for his steady presence and friendly waves, with the chilling truth now emerging from years of silence. The news crept through the town like a second blizzard, covering everything in a hush of disbelief and morbid fascination. In kitchens and corner stores, people gathered to talk in low voices, their breath catching each time the story replayed on the radio. As the investigation widened, more evidence surfaced. In Lathrop's old shed, police uncovered winter clothing that matched the era, and among it, the unmistakable orange sock, its mate sealed in a Denver evidence vault for nearly 20 years. Forensics confirmed it. The fibers were identical, and the DNA a perfect match to both crime scenes. There was no more doubt. The mountains had harbored a predator, not a savior, all these years. When the trial began, the courtroom was filled with a tension that never lifted. Families, journalists, and neighbors squeezed onto benches, the air heavy with the gravity of long-awaited justice. Lathrop, now 70, sat alone at the defense table, silent and expressionless, his eyes drifting from the judge to the cold wood floor. For 6 hours of questioning, he refused to speak, hands folded, gaze averted. Then, as the day wore into dusk, he whispered, so faint the court reporter almost missed it. "I just wanted to help her." She screamed. I panicked. The words rang hollow, failing to explain the brutality or the long years of secrecy. Prosecutors built their case on a mountain of evidence, witness accounts, the timeline, the match of the orange sock, and above all, the damning certainty of the DNA profile. Expert after expert explained how advances in genetic genealogy had brought them here, how a story left in blood and skin and fabric could finally be read by science. Sienna Marshall, the bartender, recounted her memory of Harper in the snow, speaking to a man who seemed harmless. It was all there, every detail lined up in a sequence that could not be denied. Harper's husband, Derek, was called to the stand. His voice trembled as he spoke about the last phone call, the hope he'd clung to for hours that night, the years lost to grief and unanswered questions. Alina's mother, flown in from out of state, sat with hands clenched in her lap, tears slipping down her cheeks as she listened to the story she already knew by heart. The courtroom became a place of shared sorrow and collective reckoning. Lathrop's defense offered little. He was an old man, they said, confused by the storm, never intending harm. But the jury saw through it. They saw the truth in the forensic evidence, the intent in the calculated efforts to conceal, and the haunting details that spoke of choices made in darkness. The deliberations were brief. On October 14th, 2022, the verdict was delivered. Guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Harper Caldwell and Alina Drew. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. There was no apology, no final words from Lathrop. He listened in silence, face blank, as the judge delivered the sentence. In the months that followed, appeals were filed and dismissed. Lathrop remained in prison, isolated and unvisited, a ghost from the past who had finally been seen for who he was. In May 2023, word reached Everbrook Pass that he had died quietly in his cell, the cause unremarkable, a final, anticlimactic end to decades of hidden terror. For the families, justice was both a blessing and a new burden. Closure did not come in a sudden rush. It settled slowly, mingling with grief, reshaping the emptiness left behind. Derek, older now and changed by the years, found himself wandering back to the places he and Harper had loved. Alina's mother visited the mountain pass, laying an orange flower by the roadside where her daughter's life had been cut short. Neighbors, once wary and afraid, began to reclaim their routines, hanging holiday lights, unlocking doors, letting children walk to school with friends. Yet, there was an awareness that would never truly fade, a caution that lingered beneath the surface. As the town exhaled, the mountain wind carried Harper, and the arrest of Gordon Lathrop landed in Everbrook Pass like a thunderclap rolling through the valley. Neighbors who'd long stopped fearing the night felt old anxieties rekindle, this time mixed with something sharp and personal. A sense of betrayal that the man they'd once waved to from behind frosty windshields had, for years, kept the town's greatest horror locked away behind a gentle facade. The investigation had already left little doubt. The DNA evidence, the matching orange sock hidden for decades among old scarves and coats, the timeline, the faded memory of Sienna Marshall recalling Harper's conversation with the bearded man in the beanie. Yet it was only as Lathrop faced a circle of interrogators, his hands folded, his frame hunched beneath the weight of all those silent years, that the last veil was lifted. For hours he said nothing, staring at the table, only the ticking clock and his slow, shallow breathing breaking the tension. At last, almost as if to himself, he whispered, "I just wanted to help her." She screamed. I panicked. There was no elaborate confession, no justification for the violence, no apology for the years of suffering left in his wake. But the words were enough. Combined with the evidence, it was the crack in the dam. The truth poured out, unstoppable. When the trial began in 2022, the courtroom was thick with anticipation and grief. Families of both victims, friends, and townspeople crowded the benches. Some had come to see justice done, others to finally put their memories to rest. Prosecutors built a timeline from snowy January nights, faded phone records, and the forensic miracles of modern science. Witnesses were called, searchers who'd found Harper's body, the forensics analysts, even Isabel Caro, who'd doggedly reopened the vault after all those years. Every detail was relived. The last phone call Harper made, Derek's frantic search, Sienna's memory of Harper at the bar, the young hotel maid who disappeared the same night, and always that singular, haunting clue, an orange sock, so out of place in the snow that had bound two tragedies together. Lathrop listened, still and remote, his face betraying nothing. The jury didn't take long. On October 14, 2022, Lathrop was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. The sentence was life without parole. There was no outburst, no emotion, just a final silence that seemed deeper than any words. For the families, there was relief but no joy. Closure came with the understanding that nothing could truly repair what had been lost. Derek Caldwell, older and worn by years of unanswered questions, quietly thanked the investigators who'd refused to let the case be forgotten. Alina Drew's mother wept softly on the courthouse steps, clutching a photograph of her daughter, the orange flower she'd brought as a tribute shivering in her hand. Lathrop was sent to prison, his story making headlines for a few days before fading again. In May 2023, word reached Everbrook Pass. Lathrop was dead, found in his cell, no drama, no note, just another secret finally stilled. His passing brought little satisfaction. The shadow he'd cast was too long and too cold. But the town, for the first time in years, felt the tightness in its chest ease just a little. Candlelit vigils glowed in windows as the anniversary of Harper and Alina's deaths came and went. Neighbors reached for each other again, slowly reopening the doors and routines they'd closed in fear. Children played beneath the pines. Derek, on the day he finally scattered Harper's ashes at the ridge where the sun broke through the pass, stood alone for a long while, then turned toward home. Still, in the wind that swept through the mountain, sometimes there seemed to be a whisper of Harper, of Alina, of all that had been lost and found. The mountains remembered, and the people of Everbrook Pass remembered too. But at last, the snow that once hid every secret had given up its truth, and the town could begin, finally, to let the warmth of spring return. Long after the trial faded from the front pages, the story of Harper Caldwell and Alina Drew lingered in the bones of Everbrook Pass and echoed through the mountains, woven into the fabric of small-town legend. Yet behind the headlines and whispered warnings, their tragedy was more than a story. It was a window into a real darkness, a reflection of wounds and miracles that had shaped forensic history far beyond this frozen valley. It began, as so many stories do, with the details lost to time. The case that inspired Harper and Alina's fictional ordeal had played out decades earlier in Colorado's high country, where winter's beauty masked a predator's shadow. In 1982, on a night when snow fell thick and silent, 2 women disappeared along the lonely stretches of a mountain road: Bobby Jo Oberholzer, 30, and Annette Schnee, 21. They were strangers, their lives never meant to intersect, except for that one terrible night. For months, the mountains gave up nothing. Their families launched desperate searches, tracing tire tracks, combing forested slopes, following any thread that might unravel the mystery. It was a time before cell phones and social media, before DNA was more than a scientist's dream. Evidence came piecemeal: a glove here, a photograph there, a memory of a hitchhiker or a passing truck. The days turned to weeks, then years, the ache of uncertainty hollowing out entire lives. The turning point came not with a witness, but with an object as small and seemingly insignificant as a single sock, bright orange, lost in the snow. It was found near the body of Bobby Jo Oberholzer, and later, matched to the clothing Annette Schnee had worn that night. The connection was almost surreal, a thread woven through fate and chance. It tied the 2 cases together, convincing investigators and families alike that this was not coincidence or misadventure, but the work of a predator who had stalked the mountains unseen. The man responsible, Alan Lee Phillips, would live as a free man for nearly 40 years after that storm. In a cruel twist, He too was rescued that night, found stranded in his own truck on the same mountain pass where his victims vanished. No one suspected him at the time. He blended in, unremarkable in the crowd. But the world changed while the case lay dormant. Science raced ahead, and with it, the power to unearth the past. Forensic technology evolved. DNA, once a tool of fiction, became a force that could speak for the silent and restore names to the lost. When a new generation of detectives reopened the evidence vault in the 2010s, they saw possibility where others had seen only dead ends. Carefully, reverently, they retested old samples, blood, skin, fibers trapped in clothing that had lain sealed for decades. And at last, a match. Alan Lee Phillips, a man whose past had hidden in plain sight, was identified as the killer. His arrest brought closure, but also new pain. For the families of Bobby Joe and Annette, decades had been lost to the shadows. Weddings missed, children born and grown, parents gone to their graves with no answers. The court proceedings made national news. Reporters descended on the mountain towns, hunting for old classmates, family members, anyone who remembered the day the world shifted. Phillips was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder, sentenced to life without parole. He died in prison in 2023, a year after the verdict, having offered no true explanation or remorse. The case changed more than just the lives of those closest to the victims. It marked a turning point in how cold cases are handled across the country. The breakthrough came not just from advances in DNA technology, but from a new approach, genetic genealogy, which harnessed the collective power of family trees, public records, and the tireless persistence of investigators. The orange sock, long a symbol of mystery and heartbreak, became a beacon for what justice can mean. That even after years of silence, the truth can find its way home. For Everbrook Pass, and for the countless real communities touched by such loss, the lesson is a difficult one. Hope and closure do not erase pain, nor do they bring back what's gone. But the legacy of Bobby Joe Oberholzer and Annette Schnee endures. Their families, forever changed, have worked to keep their memories alive not just as victims, but as daughters, friends, and women whose stories reshaped the world. In classrooms and conferences, forensic scientists teach their story as a landmark, a testament to patience, the necessity of innovation, and the deep human cost of every case left unsolved. For listeners drawn to stories of tragedy and redemption, Harper and Alina's fictional journey stands as both tribute and caution. Beneath every headline is a world of sorrow and strength, and every cold case is a plea for remembrance. As snow falls once more over the mountains, the wind carries the names of those lost and found. A whisper to never give up searching. Never let a story slip away unfinished. Because sometimes, all it takes is a single clue, a sock, a strand of hair, a stubborn hope, to break the silence and finally let the truth be heard. The snow has long since melted from the mountain pass, but the memory of what happened in Everbrook lingers, woven into every corner of the valley and the hearts of its people. In the years since justice was served, the story of Harper Caldwell and Alina Drew, like that of Bobby Joe Oberholzer and Annette Schnee, has become more than a cautionary tale or a local legend. It's a testament to loss, resilience, and the quiet power of truth. For their families, life did not return to what it was before. Some wounds are simply too deep, the emptiness too vast to ever be filled. There are still days when the silence in the house feels endless, when a phone rings in the middle of the night and a heart leaps in hope, only to fall again. Yet, amid the ache, there is also a stubborn flicker of healing. It lives in the small rituals, the placing of a single orange flower along the roadside each winter, the lighting of candles in windows, the quiet gatherings at the old cedar cabin where Harper and Derek once dreamed of a future. The community, too, has found new ways to honor the lost. At the library, a memorial shelf holds favorite books from both women: travel guides, poetry, novels with corners turned down by Harper's hand, and children's stories Alina once read aloud to guests at Timber Lodge. On the anniversary of their passing, townsfolk gather at the church and speak their names, not as victims, but as vibrant souls whose lives shaped everyone around them. A small scholarship in Alina's name now helps local students pursue studies in forensic science and social work, so that perhaps one day, someone else's silence will not last so long. What happened in Everbrook Pass and in the real mountains of Colorado is a part of American history, a story that changed not only the families at its center, but the very way justice is sought for the missing and murdered. In the years after the case was finally solved, law enforcement agencies across the country invested in new technology, new methods, and new hope for thousands of unsolved crimes. Genetic genealogy became not just a tool, but a lifeline. Cold cases that had gathered dust for decades suddenly had a chance, a way for the dead to speak, and for families to find answers after years of darkness. For the investigators, journalists, and everyday people who followed Harper and Alina's story, the lesson is both practical and deeply personal. Trust your instincts, even when the world tells you not to worry. Speak up. Ask questions and push for answers, because sometimes it is the quietest voice, the one that refuses to be silenced, that changes everything. The smallest detail, the overlooked clue, the persistent hope. These are the seeds from which truth can finally grow. But above all, the story is a reminder that justice is not a single moment, nor is healing a straight path. The verdict brought a kind of peace to Everbrook Pass, yet the community still lives with the awareness that danger can slip through even the closest knit circles. Parents teach their children to be careful, to look out for each other, to never take safety for granted. Strangers are met with both warmth and a subtle caution, a legacy left by nights when trust was shattered by a single, unimaginable act. Still, life moves forward. The mountains stand silent as ever, indifferent to human loss and triumph, but beneath their watchful gaze, the town endures. People return to the copper lantern for birthdays and anniversaries. Children skate on the frozen pond, carving hopeful arcs across the ice. Derek Caldwell, changed by everything he's lived through, finds comfort in volunteering at the community center, quietly supporting others who have known grief. Alina's mother keeps in touch with the students her daughter's scholarship has helped, her letters a gentle encouragement for them to never lose hope, even when the world feels cold. And for those who listen, who read, who remember, there is a call to action. Stories like this do not end. They echo, inviting each new listener to bear witness, to refuse to look away, to hold space for all that has been lost and found. The most ordinary people, clerks, students, teachers, retired rescue drivers, can change the course of countless lives, for good or for ill. What matters most is that their stories are told, and that from those stories, a new resolve is born. May Harper Caldwell and Alina Drew, like Bobby Joe and Annette, rest in peace, their memories a blessing and a challenge to all who remain. May their families know that their loved ones have not been forgotten, that their names live on in every act of courage, every discovery, every moment when the truth prevails. May those who walk the snowy mountain roads feel the warmth of community, the power of remembrance, and the promise that no injustice will be allowed to endure forever. So let this story serve as a beacon. Subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and help us keep their memory alive. As long as we share their stories and seek the truth, there is hope that justice will find its way, even for those who never found their ending. Some wounds may never fully heal, but together, by remembering and acting, we help bring light to the darkness, one story at a time.